We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Felicia's on a broken train, and she'll be here about 10. I'll get it started. Thank you. It's a busy day, so let's get started. Felicia is on a train that broke down, and then I think she had to change to another train. So she will eventually get here. 10 o'clock is when we anticipate she will be here, barring other problems. So, good morning. And welcome to this workshop to receive comments regarding summer and fall drought-related state water project and Central Valley project operations in the Bay Delta watershed. I am Fran Spivey Weber, Vice Chair of the State Water Board, and with me today are board members Didi Diadamo, Tam Doduk, and Stephen Moore. Before we get started, a few words about evacuation procedures. Please look around now and identify the 2 exits closest to you. In the event of a fire alarm, we're required to evacuate this room immediately. Please take your valuables with you and do not use the elevators. At least that won't be a temptation here. Exit down the stairway and go to our relocation site across the street in Cesar Chavez Park. That's largely for us, and for you if you want to come back. You can really go anywhere you want. Just don't stay in the building. This workshop is being held in accordance with public notice dated June 13, 2015. This is an informal workshop. The State Board, Water Board will not take any formal action, and there will be no sworn testimony or cross-examination of participants. The board members and its staff, however, may ask clarifying questions of speakers, and I hope you will. After receiving comments at this workshop, the State Water Board will not be able, actually, legally, to give direction to Tom on his order, but we will be able to ask questions and talk about general process for staff. At this workshop, the State Water Board will receive public input regarding the actions that the State Water Board has taken or may take in the future in the Bay Delta watershed related to drought. Specifically, the State Water Board will receive input regarding proposed operations of the Central Valley project to manage temperatures on the Sacramento River for protection of winter-run Chinook salmon and other related operations in the Delta watershed this summer and fall. Okay, that's the basics of the workshop, and we will be asking our attorney Phil Wiles to intervene if we get off course at all in our directions or questions. So if Phil, you should yell because you're not right here in front of me, so I may not see.
Madam Vice Chair, if I might, would Council provide some additional information and clarification as to why the board is unable to give direction to Mr. Howard today? It's not because we don't want to. There is I'm told, a legal reason why.
Sure. Phil Wiles, Assistant Chief Counsel for the board. So this has been noticed as a workshop for the board, not for action by the board. And right now there are 2 items that are pending. One is for your executive director to make certain decisions regarding the temporary urgency change petition. The other thing that's pending is the petitions for reconsideration, which are pending before the board itself. And so at this point, this item really is for the board to hear and for its executive director to hear comments related to the matter that's pending before him. These similar items and related items will be coming to the board for action potentially in the future based on that pending petition for reconsideration.
And what would be the timing for that? It seems to me that, I mean, obviously this is a matter of some urgency, and the process utilized to date has been disappointing in outcome, and yet we continue to have informational workshop after workshop where the board is not in a position to give direction or to even make decision, why should we continue to go down this path? I guess I'm looking for a more definitive pathway forward than just continuing the process that we utilized so far that has at least 2 years in a row now not borne great results. You did say we could talk process.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a fair question for sure. I think we'll have to have some other conversations perhaps after today's workshop about whether there are any practical alternatives to this approach, because obviously the issues require somewhat immediate action, and it's very difficult at times to put all of the information in front of the board for the board to actually be able to receive all of the information and make decisions in a board setting. So I completely agree. This is not optimal, but I think at this point this is the best practical approach that we've been able to take forward. And I understand your point. We should be discussing whether there are other alternatives to the procedures that we have in place today.
So I guess my request then to those who will be speaking today is, given how this has played out, not only this year, but last year, speaking as one board member, I've never been satisfied with the process we used, recognizing that there were limitations and there were urgency involved, and therefore that was the most practical pathway towards making decisions. But I'm now very, very much open to other suggestions and other pathways, given that what we've tried to do so far have not been successful and has created a lot of, what's the word I should use? Angst. I think it's more than angst, but yes, just a lot of undesirable outcomes.
Thank you, Tam. And we will have an opportunity for board members to say something in addition before we get started. We are broadcasting this workshop on the internet and recording both audio and video. Please be sure that you come up to the podium and that you state your name and speak into the microphone. We will begin with an introduction from the state board staff, but prior to that, we will be letting legislators jump the queue because they have a busy schedule across the way. And so I will be describing our basic plan, but right after I finish, we will go straight to 3 legislators who are here with us today. We'll have an introduction from the State Water Board staff for 15 minutes, followed by presentations from Ron Milligan with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and John Lehigh with the Department of Water Resources on the Central Valley Project and State Water Project operations, including the Sacramento Temperature Management Plan for 30 minutes. We will then hear from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, National Marine Fisheries Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on fisheries-related issues associated with the project's operation for 30 minutes. We will then hear from panels that have requested to speak. The first panel will be the American River water users for 15 minutes, followed by the San Joaquin River Irrigation District's 20 minutes, and South of Delta water users who have 7 speakers for an hour. The South of Delta water users will not speak before 1 p.m. Following or in between the panels, if time allows, we will hear comments from the public. To ensure a productive and efficient workshop and to ensure that all participants have had an opportunity to participate, give oral comment, we will probably limit your comments to 3 minutes if you're from the public. The panels are encouraged to expedite their presentations as much as possible. And but we will start in just a few minutes with the legislators. And then we may interrupt you as we go along when other legislators come in. If you intend to speak today, please fill out a blue speaker card and give it to the clerk over here. If you're not sure whether you wish to speak, fill out a card and mark if necessary. And now, are there additional comments to TAMS from the board members? Steve?
Thank you, Vice Chair Spivey Weber. I just want to, as kicking things off, I want to assure everyone in this room and anyone watching on the web how aware we are of a great deal of passion and a great deal of knowledge in our state with respect to the water issues that we face. And I want to call on you all as a challenge, this is for ourselves and everyone, to tap into our best problem-solving capacity. The scarcity of water resources in a fourth consecutive year of drought creates friction. And this friction will create heat, but we also can transform this energy into light. I'm hoping that the comments we received today in our conversation in this workshop will help shed light on those things that this state water board can do to achieve its mandate to balancing the critical beneficial uses of water in our state. Water has a paradox. It can engender competition. It also can engender collaboration. And so we have these choices before us as we face a long, hot summer. What stories will emerge from this summer and fall? Will they be inspiring stories of neighbors helping each other? We had some examples of that just in the last 48 hours, I believe, of senior water right holders coming to the aid of the junior and the communities for the benefit of health and safety of our California citizens. Will we have these stories, or will we also have stories that come from the pages of the same old script of conflict and entrenched positions? Can we change the script? It will take courage to step outside our groups and our firmly held beliefs of ourselves and others. But as Eleanor Roosevelt said during World War II, courage is more exhilarating than fear, and in the long run, easier. So I hope to hear comments today that can shed light on what the Water Board can do to achieve balance in a fair and equitable way and keep our water resources going strong into the future together. Thank you.
Pam, do you have anything else to add?
I think I've had my say. Thank you.
And we'll give Felicia a chance to catch her breath.
That was very well said, Board Member Moore. I couldn't agree more. Looking for opportunities, things that this board can do. I'm also curious about what the agencies can do to look for unique ways to manage the limited water that's out there, do it in such a way to provide for multiple benefits. And one of the things that I'd like to see coming out of this, we've really been focusing on temperature and CFS. I'm also interested in learning more about critical timeframes in terms of the months that are involved, the critical time periods for the fish, and also the critical time periods to move water, especially in the areas where the crops have already been planted and decisions were made in reliance on incorrect information. So anything that staff can do, the agencies, and then also the public at large to help shed better light on what can be done specifically in terms of the months, and also in terms of the impacts to the fish, but also the specific impacts, trying to make it more real to translate what does a certain amount of CFS mean in terms of water deliveries or additional cuts. And then I just have sort of a logistical request for those of you that do have PowerPoints. I know that this is all having to be put together, the presentations at the last minute. But if you could please provide your PowerPoints as soon as possible to the clerk, because I actually like to get hard copies where I take my notes on the PowerPoints. So thank you.
And Felicia, do you want to say something before we get started?
Sorry I'm late. Train. Couldn't do anything about it. It's frustrating me sitting there waiting, so sorry to be joining you late. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'll have to catch up on what my colleagues' comments were. Anybody who invokes Eleanor Roosevelt, that's something that should inspire us in general. I look forward to hearing from folks. I know people, we're dealing with unimaginable conflicts and challenges, all deeply felt. I was saying to someone the other day, I felt that we were not just between Scylla and Charybdis here, but Scylla, Charybdis, Medusa the Gorgon, and Godzilla, just because the challenges are so difficult and the stakes so high. So I'm looking forward to hearing what folks have been doing, struggling valiantly to try and deal with this issue with no perfect resolution. I'm going to be particularly interested in the sort of real-time management, what folks are going to do to really be monitoring this and make sure we know what's happening in real time and making those changes. And I know you all have spent an incredible amount of time together, so I'm just looking forward to soaking it in and hearing what the agencies and the stakeholders have come up with, hopes, fears, solutions, and then Plan Bs.
So we will start with 3 legislators who are in the room. If there are others, please let us know. Senator Jim Nelson will be first, followed by Assemblywoman Beth Gaines, followed by Assemblyman Jim Patterson.
Chair Marcus and board members,
Oh, yeah. You gotta punch a button.
honored to be able to be before you. We got it. Chair Marcus and board members, it's an honor to be here with you again. I appreciate that opportunity. I've intently listened to the remarks, the prefacing remarks by your members here. Board Member Tam has talked about collaboration, and I'm going to get to that as a point, well, not collaboration, but problem solving, and what are our different ways, and I'm going to talk about that. And Mr. Moore, I couldn't agree with you more, indeed, and I think that will be the tenor of my remarks here today. Your notice today of this proceeding was encouraging. Under the notes section, you talk about the salmon and other water related. And on down into the later part, you have been very specific, as you have mentioned then, agricultural, wildlife, industrial uses of water. And that would include, in terms of agriculture, the farm workers. They are a voice that do not often get heard. Your last hearing, I remember this place was nearly filled with an awful lot of them. In 2009, some historic policy changes were made in water in long deliberations, and a bond was also proffered that year that later it languished and then became Prop 1. But there were several changes in water policy. We, for decades, had become Delta-centric, and I'm a Delta senator, used to be. I've farmed the east and west sides of the San Joaquin Valley and the Sacramento Valley as well, and represented all the Sacramento River and its watershed. And I certainly do love the Delta, but everything in water cannot be and never should have been about the Delta itself. And we poured billions of dollars into the Delta with very little to show for it. And Tam has spoken to what are the solutions. Well, I've said in Budget Committee this year, we can't do the same thing because it did not work. And certainly water storage is a part of our future. And the reservoir opportunities provided in Proposition 1 are significant, because for the first time we're entertaining the manifest need for storage. In terms of impacts now with the flows from Shasta, another county of the 19 that I have represented, that affects a lot of people here in Placer and Sacramento counties. Some 500,000 people are going to be affected. And particularly so if Folsom is dewatered. And that ought not be our goal to see that happen. It could by the end of the year. And it is indeed about managing our flows. Now, this suggestion is not one that's going to bear fruit for the rest of this season or necessarily to help in the immediate moment. But I encourage you, even though it's not statutorily required, to do what something called Senate Bill 1086 did in the 1980s. I had become weary of all the fighting going on in the Delta and up and down the Sacramento River. Another great quote, though, thinking of Eleanor Roosevelt, this is Mark Twain, and he had that famous Mark Waters for fighting. Well, I saw way back in the 80s, early 80s, that this fighting was just not going to get it done. So I authored Senate Bill 1086, which was a formal legal structure, which required entities of state and local government and federal government to be together on a forum. We called it a forum. I did not want it to be a power board with authorities to fine and levy fees and to regulate and pass regulations. It's called the Sacramento River Conservation Forum. And its singular probable accomplishment as of such an entity, it has survived for nearly 30 years. And by the exact structure, and I carefully crafted the bill to mean this person from federal government agency this and agency that, state government agency this and that, local counties along the river, that they would be able to be together and talk about the river. A management plan, not just one management plan that was promulgated and proffered in the 80s, but one that would be sustaining. Maybe we need some kind of a formal structure to that effect now. What happened with this, of some interest, and one of my greatest motives, frankly, with 1086 was making sure that landowners were at the table, that they got to talk to people. And they got to be key parts of it. And many of the farmers are supervisors, so they had a formal seat at the table beyond being an agricultural person. And there was no trust. The agricultural people were so dismayed that they were being critical of it. And I said, no, you've got to be at the table. Now, that's enough about 1086, but the concept has value. And frankly, CalFed was modeled on that, the original structure of CalFed. Then CalFed morphed into all kinds of other things about spending money instead of managing the Delta issues. So that would be something that I would certainly encourage in some formal way, and I'll be entertaining in my own mind's eye and mind how we might do that legislatively. And I would work with the board to effect that. More specifically here, these collaborations of the agencies to ensure that the agricultural industry and the communities down here are not affected. I think it puts a face on what your burden is. As you think about water policy, there are 500,000 human beings right around here who are going to be affected. I was meeting with people just yesterday from Porterville. Now that's another issue in another area, but I deal with people who have lost the water and don't have any. And every week I'm very carefully watching my domestic well to see if the pressures are going to go down. But they're really hurting, and those farm workers who showed up at your last meeting here are a part of it. So the people of the Sacramento and Placer areas are rightfully concerned. And what that temperature plan that you come forth will be, what water rights implications may come to pass, but they are particularly interested in just being able to have some water for their human needs. And one of the key elements of the water plan in 2009 was, in fact, co-equal goals, which I suggested and argued in the negotiations that people had a water right, human beings had a water right. Their water right had diminished. And I encourage the board to be sensitive to that water right. It isn't just environmental, wildlife, industrial, agricultural uses of water, municipal uses of water, and that's where I'm getting to the people end, the municipal uses. The other uses that are the human uses, and frankly, agricultural use is a human use because it translates into food and fiber for the citizens that we represent. I know that you're going to be working with deliberation. I would ask that as you do so, you keep those several points in mind. Think about that longer-term collaboration. Envision in your mind's eye those 500,000 people, or those tens of thousands of farm workers in Firebaugh, Madera, in Kern and Kings counties, how their lives are affected by your decisions. It is a heavy burden, board members, and I empathize with you. And I'll give you a term in closing to cling to. I call it the splendid loneliness of leadership. The splendid part is that you have the opportunity to affect the lives of millions and millions of your fellow Californians. The burden is you have the ability to control the lives and affect the lives of millions and millions of Californians. As you do so, please keep these human needs in mind. Please keep the longer-term collaboration opportunities in mind. And I'll be coming forth with some more specific ideas pursuant to your very direct challenge here today. I think that you've given me fruit for discussion and for thinking with the water folks I'm dealing with. I will be guided by that. I thank you very much, Chair Marcus and members, for your time.
Thank you. That was very, very good. Assemblywoman Beth Gaines. Oh, she hasn't arrived yet. Assemblyman Jim Patterson Hyde.
Thank you to the board for the opportunity to be here to address you and to speak on behalf of so many of the people that I have the privilege of representing. And I want to speak directly to the Central Valley Project Operations and Temperature Management Plan because I think that the plan that you are considering today really represents an important opportunity for this state agency to do its due diligence and to do its good work, but also to keep its word to our farmers. Our farmers are doing so much more with so much less water, and yet they seem to be perpetually in the crosshairs of the reductions. We are joined today by dozens of farmers, hardworking people from Fresno, Madera, Merced, Tuolumne, and Stanislaus County. Obviously, every drop of water is vital to them. What we are talking about is a whole lot more than a few drops of water. If the water these farmers are counting on is not returned to them, according to the California Farm Water Coalition, the estimated direct crop loss will be about $4.5 billion. Now that number hits home when you start to consider all of the lives that will be impacted through farming in our state. Farming in our state is really a family business, and it really is a family environment when you look at the extended members of that family who will be affected. There is an entire workforce that will be the processors, those who transport, all of this because of agriculture's large personal footprint in the entire state and in the globe. And I think this is the message I want to leave. They are depending on this water because they have planned for it and they have paid for it in anticipation of moments like this. So I think we have to be sure that promises that are made are promises that are kept to our folks who paid and planned for this water. So I urge the board, as you consider and as you implement the plan, please implement the entire plan and hold up your end of the bargain to return the water and to do so in such a timely way that the planning can actually take fruit and be harvested. Thank you for the time to visit with you.
Thank you. And now I will turn everything over to Felicia to start with the State Water Board staff introduction.
State Water Board staff introduction. Take it away.
Very good.
Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members, public. My name is Les Grober. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights, and I'm joined here today to my immediate right by Diane Riddle, Environmental Program Manager for the Bay Delta section, and Dana Heinrich, Senior Staff Counsel in the Office of Chief Counsel. I think I should preface really anything that I say here just to assure the board and everyone here that staff is very mindful of the import of everything that we're discussing today. These are large quantities of water, and this is a big change that's being contemplated now from what was originally planned. So I think that's important to say that up front. So with that, I'm just, yes.
Moment of privilege. I'm wondering if Assemblywoman, would you like to speak or would you like to listen to the presentation? I know your time is very short. So we're happy to, before we get into it, to just turn it right over to you. Sorry, didn't mean to just startle you there, but I thought I'd stop before.
Not startled at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to be here. It's good to see you. Thank you for having me. Folsom Lake is part of the district that I represent. An estimated 500,000 people and hundreds of businesses rely on Folsom Lake for their water. While I understand that the board is in a very difficult situation, running the lake down to 120,000 acre feet would have devastating effects, both practically and economically. I'm respectfully requesting that this board develop a revised temperature management plan that allows you to work closely with our area water managers, which consist of the cities of Sacramento, Folsom, Roseville, and the San Juan water districts, to address this situation in a way that does not put our water supplies in jeopardy. With so little margin for error, please make it a priority to work with us locally and make protecting water supplies the #1 priority. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.